And we're live.
Exciting!
So, right? So I guess this is the first episode of Heathen Talk, podcast built by Redditors for the heathen community.
And for those of you who don't know, my name is Lauren, also known as That's Not Nice.
I'm Josh. I'm also known as a narco-heathen.
And we really have no idea what we're doing.
Not a clue.
No.
This is going to be one of the worst first episodes ever recorded, and I'm super stoked.
You know, but that's the good thing about heathenry is they're going to tell us just how horrible it is.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yay constructive criticism.
I was telling some of my buddies, it's like, getting ready to start a podcast. I've got no script, no clue what we're going to talk about, and just enough resources to be dangerous. What could go wrong?
Everything. But that's okay. To quote my friend and heathen author Ben Wagner, we all die horribly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's one hell of a way to start a podcast. We all die horribly. I think that should be the title of this one.
I agree. That'll work.
So before the show, we were talking about some of the things we wanted to touch on, and I think the first one we should go with is probably the military's reluctance to go ahead and give heathens in the army the recognition they give Wiccans, Christians, humanists, pretty much everyone else.
Now let's say, I do want to say something here. The Air Force fully recognizes heathens. So let's give them credit that, they fully recognize it. And the Army, however, is the one that says, oh yeah, in January, they're like, yeah, sure, you're approved. Oh, no, sorry. And that's just, but at the same time, this is not something unusual. Back in the 80s and 90s, Pete Pathfinder Davis, who was a Wiccan priest, head of the Aquarian Tabernacle Church, really went through very similar things, fighting to get Wicca recognized. And Wicca is a lot bigger than heathenry, numbers-wise. Pure numbers of soldiers and general just bodies in the seats.
Didn't they just get their recognition in like 2001, I think?
Yeah. It was, and that was through a lot of work by Selena Fox and, kind of big name pagans who also happen to have, a little more in the resources sometimes. As far as they, publishers and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think it's that critical mass of resources that heathenry lacks that it kind of needs to help kick this over the top. I mean, we do have the Troth and the AFA and even that third one that nobody can remember.
Asatru Alliance. It's and plus there's other smaller groups that have popped up. But yeah, Asatru Alliance.
The Asatru Alliance. And then there's the new one, the Asatru Community. And we have all of those things, but none of them are really working in a concerted effort together to get this sort of movement off the ground. It sounded from the article I read today that it was pretty much just Josh Heath and some other military heathens that are really spearheading this thing.
Well, and I think that it's important for them to spearhead this because I really, feel like people are going to take, just somebody like me. I've never served in the military. My opinion on, what the military should do is shouldn't be taken as seriously as someone who is there and who's in a member of the military and this directly affects. But, that is one of the big problems heathenry has. We don't work together very well.
Well, and, there's some reasons for that. I mean, we are a naturally tribalistic religion. We get in our little groups and we think our group does it the best and all of the rest of you can go kick rocks. But at the same time, when it comes to these bigger issues that affect us nationally, like the military, or even when it comes to things like the prison the prison system recognizing heathenry, but only having it be there in a negative light due to the Aryan Brotherhood and things like that, it's very hard for us to come together and sit down and say, no, this is heathenry, this is not, this should be recognized, and present a united front.
Now, I will say that there's been a lot of work by InReach to do. They've developed a curriculum for heathenry for federal prisons that's been pretty well received. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree. We have this problem where the only time you hear heathenry or asatru is either because Dan O'Halloran got arrested or some crazy racist is doing something.
And once that comes up, then we all, kick and scream and say that doesn't represent us, but you rarely see a coherent, level-headed response from someone who is universally respected in the heathen community.
Probably because there are very few people who are universally respected in the heathen community.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, I mean, because on one hand, you have people, pretty much any big-name heathen you bring up, whether it is Diana Paxson or Steve McNallen, to go to the other end of the spectrum, you're going to have people who are like, man, they're great, and I really like them, and you're going to have people who proclaim that they are the cancer that is killing heathenry.
Yeah. I don't know that there's a solution to that. That's the tough part.
Yeah, I kind of think, though, one problem with heathenry is that we're so small that people outside of heathenry want to kind of treat us all as one kind of group. But the truth of the matter is heathenry, maybe there needs to be that step forward where we say, okay, heathenry is a umbrella term like Christianity. And within Christianity, you have, Mormons, you have Seventh-day Adventists, Baptists, Catholics, all who have very different beliefs, but all fall under that umbrella. But the problem is we just don't have the critical mass to claim an umbrella.
Well, I think for the most part, the heathen community has accepted heathen as that umbrella. You do see some calls for asatru to be that umbrella, and there are a lot of us who don't think that's a great idea. But we're willing to accept heathenry as that umbrella because it does a better job of encompassing the various Anglo-Saxon heathens, the Swedish heathens, continental heathens, all the different prefix heathens that there are.
I agree. And then, but you also have some people who, and I think sometimes that's a generational issue. You're kind of people who became heathen in the 80s and 90s are much more likely to want to stick with asatru versus even somebody who's became a heathen in the last 5 years. I mean, there's a huge, almost cultural difference between those just due to the availability of materials.
Well, and that availability of materials, I think, eventually is going to be what pushes the army to accept heathenry as its religion. The more we get research done about, what the old heathens did and what the Christians adopted from the old heathen practices and how we apply those to our modern lives, the more modern heathen theology gets a foothold, I think the harder it's going to be for the government itself to reject our petition to be recognized as a religion.
And see, I just thought we just have to get annoying enough. Because that's really kind of what a lot of groups have done. The whole reason that we have any recognition as far as religious corporation recognition for pagan religions is because a Hindu clerk at the IRS felt bad for the Aquarian Tabernacle Church. And it took them 10 years. Yeah. But it took them 10 years to finally get that through. So it's going to be slow because we're a smaller group. We are a more fractured group. So it is just going to take time, but I think that we're moving at a better pace than 10, 20 years ago.
Well, and I also think we're building on the foundations laid by other minority religions before us. I mean, every step we've been able to take forward has been because of steps that the Wiccans took or steps that the Hindus took before them, et cetera, et cetera. And that as they take those steps, then it becomes easier for us to follow in those steps to gain that recognition and acceptance.
Absolutely. And plus, we can just say, hey, at least we're not Satanists.
Yeah, you could, though I have been called that before.
I have to laugh. I live in Arkansas, and they're talking about moving that Satanist sculpture that was supposed to go up in Oklahoma to our state capital. And I think this is probably the funniest thing I've heard in a long time.
I personally would love to see it. I really would.
I think it's going to be a tourist attraction. Think of all the people who will drive to wherever it is just to sit in Baphomet's lap and take a picture.
The only problem with it will be that all of the atheists will claim a moral victory and the rest of us will never hear the end of it.
Well, but on the other side of it, the Hindus here, because you're talking about the Hindus here in Arkansas, are raising money to put a legitimate sacred statue on the state capitol grounds if they put up this Ten Commandments monument. So that at least if it works here, that they're going to have to take like co-credit with the Hindus.
Well, there are worse groups to share credit with.
True. And we have a pretty great community here that has been really supportive of other, minority religions when they've had issues. And I really think that's another thing when it comes to like this recognition in the military. We need to reach out to other small groups who've done this successfully and say, hey, who did you talk to? What exactly did you do? What kind of documentation did you have? How annoying did you have to get? How many congressmen did you have to call?
Yeah. I think that's definitely one of those things that we can use these previously built communities, especially with religions that aren't, how do I want to put this? Especially with religions that aren't universalist in their dogma. So with religions that aren't, you have to believe this or you're wrong, that offers some interesting opportunities to work together with them and bring in our religion into those circles so that we have a safer place to go to and get, for instance, the military people some exposure to that so that they know it's not some freaky Viking bloodlust religion,
And really, I think one of the things that is working against us, and I'm being a snob here and I will admit it, is Facebook heathenry sometimes. Because you get those brosatrus, basically, who are so wrapped up in being Viking reenactors that they don't ever go any deeper than that. And they also usually are the loudest. So that's a lot of times what people, when they see heathenry, they think that we're all just a bunch of Viking reenactors, and it's all manly men with beer and whatever manly men association they have.
But then, we've come to colloquially refer to that as Facebook heathenry or brosatru or Viking true or any one of those less than pleasant monikers.
There was actually a discussion on Facebook of like trying to come up with like an Old Norse type ish word for people like that. And I'm like, that's effort. That's dedication, man. I just said, just call them culturally heathen.
To be fair, there's already an Icelandic word for neckbeard, so...
Oh, there you go. That's the word. I'll have to look that up. That might be a great word to borrow from Iceland.
Every once in a while, there's a gem.
Every once in a while, yeah. It's good to know that Reddit culture transcends all nationalities.
That's true. There's no escaping the Reddit.
No, never. So, Go ahead.
I think ultimately we, when it comes to the military things, we need to lean on former military heathens to really lead the way in that. But I think that non-military heathens need to be ready to stand in the wings and stand up for and support those heathens who have chosen to have decided, if that makes sense.
I lost you there for a second.
Uh-oh. I was saying that I think it's up to those of us who are not military heathens to stand behind and stand up for and follow the lead of the military heathens who are fighting to get the recognition in the army that they deserve.
Absolutely. I mean, people definitely need to be willing to write letters, make phone calls, um, because that's how these things happen. I mean, you you do this, and then when that doesn't work, you start, you do these kind of recognized action days. We're like, okay, on this day, everybody call your congressman, send out these emails, and try to get attention to it, because it's a bureaucracy, and that's kind of how you have to finagle it sometimes.
Mm. Well, and I think that that's going to take a greater level of restraint and control in social media than many modern heathens have chosen to exhibit.
Let's be honest here, because it's not just a heathen thing. Many
No.
people, really, because I mean, Facebook brings out the worst in people. But I agree. I think that it's, I think, for all that, and we also have to get out of this. And it's a big complaint I have with the idea that I have my little group, and all that I care about is what's good for my little group, and I'm only going to advocate for my little group. And realize that community is more than that. Family is more than that. While I don't necessarily have to accept every person that wields the label heathen or asatru as my community, I can't divorce myself from the greater community either, to the sense that I feel I have no obligation to heathenry as a whole.
I see what you're saying, and I think that gets I think it gets tricky. Is there's this line that you can't really. It's a difficult to define line. For instance, I've been in Facebook groups where they claim that they're all under frith with one another, and to be frank, they're not. There's
No.
a shared peace, but I only have frith with my family and those I have oathed to and sworn to uphold frith with. And if you're not one of those people, I don't have frith with you.
Well, no, and I think the part of that is because there's such a poor understanding of what that word means. Because it's been used either in popular culture or just by people who didn't know better back in the 70s, to just mean peace.
Right. And I think that's still one of the things that, not to be dramatic, kind of holds us back from building real communities, because everyone wants to claim this thing that they don't understand.
Right, but still, I think that there is a fine line, and at the end of the day, if you have to look at whether, well, if I call my senator, my cousin Rose works in the senator's office, and she might find out that I'm heathen, and that could cause some major issues in my family. That's one thing, but I don't like the not in my backyard, and I have mine, so screw you attitude that you see sometimes. I think that that's doing a big disservice to the community.
I completely agree. There needs to be a delineation between my tribe, heathens, and the rest of the world. It's I think you have to look at it as, you have your family, your tribe, heathenry, then, to borrow a term from Christianity, the secular world.
Yeah. You have your inner yard, your outer yard, and then that which is not a part of either. And like it's a balance, and it's hard. It's really hard, and I think because we're such a young religion that we're still struggling with where those lines are and how do we deal with this. And I think it's just going to take time. But
I
I'll
think
put
it's
this
going to take time, and I also think that it really comes down to people who have deeper understandings of these particular concepts being given the ability and the opportunity to prove that they have, or that they deserve, this reputation, and thus be able to share the meaning of these concepts.
And people being willing to listen.
So there is someone who I shared the broadcast link. There's someone who is interested in being added if you don't mind them hopping in.
Sure.
Let me see if I can work Google Hangouts, because, I am smarter than a trained monkey.
I'm not, so.
All right. Give me half a second.
Okay. We could edit all this out.
In the meantime, while we're waiting for that, at just some brief housekeeping, we are still planning on doing the Cascadian Heathen meetup next late spring, early summer. We're going to get a campground outside of the Dalles, Oregon, and do a brewing contest, a mead making contest. We're planning on having a feast. Someone has said they're going to send us a sparkly unicorn. It's going to be kind of awesome.
I think that's great. Yeah, I've put that on my tentative. I'd have to fly out there, of course, but we maybe even do a live show from out there.
That might be difficult just because the Dalles is the middle of nowhere.
Okay, we could record a show out there.
Absolutely, we could record a show. The winner of the brewing contest would be could be interviewed, or something crazy like that. Hey, there he is. Maybe.
I see somebody.
Howdy.
Howdy. So you were telling me that you wanted to chime in. You may have to speak up, though.
Okay, so that was really freaky. I apologize for that. The live stream is a couple of seconds behind the actual live. Hi.
Hi.
I'm Forvern. My name is Toby Bianchi. I live in Boise, Idaho. I'm the worthless one.
Well, we all have our shortcomings.
No, I'm the evil liberal feminist, so it's all right.
That's all right, good. Although
I thought you were not of the blood one.
that's my current flair.
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
We're now proving you're not a female.
I appreciate that.
So for our lurker friend, if for those of you who aren't on the subreddit, there's been somebody who's just been going around running their mouth about Forvin and saying that Forvin is really secretly a female social justice warrior, blah, 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 blah. So we have proof now.
It's
Irrefutable, even.
Yeah.
my picture's out there on the sub. There was I think it was actually from the Ask a Heathen sub, where my hipster cred was in question.
Oh.
So.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and vouch that you are 100% pure hipster.
That's not fair.
Okay, so 99% pure hipster. You lose a percentage because you live in Boise.
Oh, but Boise is where all the Idahoan hipsters go to die. It's
Idahoan
a great town.
hipsters. That's an oxymoron.
I ride around, walk around, and there's like lots of bumper stickers: blue girl, red state. I'm a member of my local snooty grocery store co-op, and that's where I get my good beer. But anyway, the reason I wanted to jump in here was I wanted to act as the voice of defense for I'm just going to concentrate on my little corner of heathenry, and I'm going to let the rest of heathenry deal with its things. And the reason I wanted to jump on in here and participate is that I think that that's a very valid choice in regards to the current stage of heathen growth. The idea of a national heathenry is amorphous, and yes, there are heathens across the nation, but people are still in the process of sussing out amongst themselves what it means to be heathen, what it actually means to themselves, and to how they want to present to the rest of the world. And I think a lot of the real work is done at the local level, and choosing to concentrate solely on that is recognizing the current state of our embryonic growth. Facebook and Reddit and social media tends to give us a sense that we're a lot larger than we actually are, because we see heathens everywhere. But that's not actually how it is. We're very, very tiny. I mean, the sub consists of 4,500 subscribers out of a user base that's numbered in the millions. So I did want to kind of come in and not say that your comments aren't valid or that you don't have a point, because I think that it is important to decide what it means to be heathen and to display that. But I think that choosing to concentrate local is also important.
I'm not going to argue with that it's not important. Where my problem comes in is when people exclusively focus that we're focused on local and we don't care about everybody else, but then turn around and complain when we have issues like the federal government, the army not recognizing heathenry as a religious choice.
Okay,
that's what I see a lot of, are people who are like, this is, I shouldn't have to worry about anything. When I make moral decisions, I do what's best for the tribe, and that means that whatever happens outside of my group, I don't care, as long as what happens benefits them. And you have people that take that to, because we're human, not so great places. That's, racism comes into play. That's been my personal experience with people. I'm not saying everyone who believes that way is racist. I'm saying it's been my experience that has been a justification for being racist.
Even for accepting racists, I can see
yes.
that. I think my stance on this is that while we should be focused on what our small groups are doing, Toby, you should be focused on what your group is doing, Lauren on hers, me on mine. I think we also need to accept the fact that we live in a global world. Even if there's only, I think the census had it at like 15,000 heathens worldwide, we're still part of this bigger universe. And we need to, assert what little group power we have in order to make sure that we're not walked on.
Absolutely.
And it really comes down to this to the question of tactics. I've had that conversation with Lauren before. We can agree on goals, but we're probably going to disagree on the tactics of those goals.
And that's why I agree with what we said earlier, that this is not for me as a non-military member, someone who's never served, I shouldn't be trying to general this thing. I'm not in charge, but man, when asked to say, hey, can you make these calls or do whatever, I should be willing to say yes, if I can.
That's fair.
I think, I agree. I think that's fair that, we should be able to, in things that affect the larger community, be able to come together and say, okay, yeah, I'll make these calls. I will do my part to push forward this agenda because it benefits my group and all these other groups as well.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
I definitely agree, and I think that that's what's going to cause us to grow as a visible, larger heathen. And I hate to use the word community because it's got so much baggage within heathenry, but that's really what's going to establish us as a visible religious path. There we go, a visible religious path. So,
yes, but this wouldn't be fun if we all just sat here and agreed. So
no.
I'm gonna play a little bit of a devil's advocate, and also kind of beat my dead horse to death again.
You're good at that.
Yeah.
Don't confuse what a religion is for what a religion has, or actually, more clearly stated, don't confuse what a religion has with what it is. The question of the symbols and the right for members of the military to have that on their headstone is something that a religion has, and that will come in time, and it's not something that necessarily it has to happen right away. I think the onus on this is to look at what it is you're trying to accomplish here. And, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're a soldier and you have military service, most military burials aren't going to be in a military cemetery.
That's
now,
true.
I want to kind of correct you here.
Okay.
Because right now, military, like if you're buried in a veterans or military cemetery, that actually falls under the Veterans Administration. And the Veterans Administration approved the Hammer of Thor as a emblem for headstones. I'm not sure I know it's been several years ago, but I pulled up the VA website to make sure I was right, but it is emblem number 55.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right after the Church of the Nazarene. That is available. So that has not been a problem for several years. It's the recognition, being able to put it on their dog tags.
Mm-hmm.
It's being able to have that in their records, so if something happens, they're able to call in their Gothi, or their remains are handled in a way that's sensitive to their own personal, religious beliefs should they pass away. That's really what they're fighting for right now, is that actual recognition while they're on active duty, not necessarily after they've passed away.
Okay, that's fair.
And I think that article did mention that, there was if an active duty serviceman did die, while he was in Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever we go next, he would likely be given a Protestant Christian ceremony versus a heathen ceremony, which I could see being objectionable.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I think it's one of those issues that where we are now as a religious path, if you will, the issue is almost too big, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think that I honestly feel that it's gonna come down to a court case, because it shouldn't matter how small or large a religious group is, really. I think that what's going to happen is they're going to keep trying. The Army's going to pull this same stuff they just did in January, and the ACLU is finally going to say, okay, we have a case, and there's going to be a lawsuit. I think that's basically it's going to take to get it through, because they are dragging their feet.
I got to be honest, I really don't want it to take that particular route. I think that route would be detrimental in the long run. And there's... I think it would be better if it took it a long time to get to where it is versus fighting for it in court. Because again, that's not my culture. It's not my... I don't have any experience with those rituals. I don't know anything that goes on within it. And so for the ACLU to step in and try and force that entire culture to change overnight, I don't think that's a good thing.
Well, the thing is, the ACLU won't step in unless someone who is a party to that case, meaning a heathen military member, says, hey, I would like to file suit. And quite honestly, it may not be heathenry that makes it happen. It may be some other small religious group that's not currently recognized by the Army.
Let's all be honest here. It's probably going to be the Satanists.
I want to know where they're getting their funding. Because really, they have a lot of disposable income. Just saying. They built that giant statue. It is.
Well, I didn't want to say anything. No,
well, at least you can admit it now.
No, I think my question to the group is, what do you think the proper answer is in the current environment? And I don't think that's something that we could possibly answer, the three of us, because none of us are members of the military. I think perhaps this topic should be tabled to another episode when we can bring somebody with actual, real, direct experience.
I agree. I vote we maybe try to get a hold of some of these guys from the article, since they're the ones heading it up, and see what they want.
I think that, tabling it's a great idea, and that's a perfect segue to move into another subject that I'm sure Toby will find absolutely fascinating. The other thing we wanted to talk about a little bit was the legalization of same-sex marriage, or as it should be called, just making marriage legal.
Yeah, it's just marriage.
Okay, this will be fun. Do you guys want to just give me the whole hour, or do you want to?
Well, how about I start with what I was gonna bring up here, and then when you have something interesting to say, go ahead and chime in.
Okay.
One of the things that I had noticed when I was doing what I shouldn't ever do and perusing my Facebook is just how many people were torn and divided on this whole same-sex marriage, and now is still, after years of debate, going to destroy the traditional family. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the traditional family, from a heathen point of view, was destroyed a long time ago. And it was replaced with something that, to me, seems inherently dysfunctional. That being the nuclear family.
I think the nuclear family is very much an invention of the last 100 years. As we moved into, an industrialized society and people started moving away from their families, their extended families. But yeah, I agree. It's definitely not. If you had said this is describe a family to one of our, religious ancestors, they would have never described what we consider a family now.
Not one wife, one father, 2.5 children, and a dog.
Yeah. Sometimes a cat.
I want to jump in here, just to throw my favorite heathen joke, which is every time someone brings up the fact that cats were given to families when newlywed couples when starting a new hearth, that cat was going to be sacrificed and put into the walls of the hearth to protect it from unfriendly spirits. They find skeletons of cats in witch houses going back centuries. It's one of my favorite things. It's like, oh yeah, they did that, but I don't think Fluffy's gonna be pattering about. But that gets into.
So what you're saying is the ancestors were just didn't care much for pet cats, or what?
No, what I'm saying is that what we know is not always what we know on the surface is not always the full picture.
Absolutely.
That our ancestors lived in a 4-dimensional space, and we only have like 1 or 2 dimensions of that image. The best we have is a painting of that place, and a painting is 2 dimensions. So the more we know about our ancestors, and the more we get back to what it means to be heathen and what it means to think like a heathen, the deeper our understanding goes. And do I think we need to sacrifice cats to put into the walls? No, but I think that having a complex and rich understanding of the spiritual ecology that we live in is very important. But bringing it back to the concept of marriage, I think family has shifted to mean what our ancestors would once have called hearths or homes, which would have been some sort of parental unit, almost entirely a man and a woman. If he was particularly rich, it would probably be a man and several women. The children, the servants, and the livestock, which were part of the family. So that's something to keep in mind as well, is that if we asked a heathen, an elder heathen, about what does family mean to you, his answer wouldn't be the same thing. If he were to ask us, well, what does family mean to us, he would recognize certain elements of that social institution. He just wouldn't call it a family.
Definitely. I think that our viewpoint is a much narrower definition of family that would include what is in his or her purview, but his or her purview is a much broader circle.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that one of the things that, struck me is there's a common phrase that you'll see tossed around, it takes a village to raise a child. And I think that this falls directly into that with, we have this new concept of marriage and how it's destroying what we have colloquially decided as a family. And yet, on some level, we know that this grouping of 4.5 individuals, according to the census, isn't enough to really be a full family. We need more.
Yeah, I was very lucky growing up that I had my great-grandmother and my great-great-aunt very involved in my life. Most kids don't these days. You may live across the country from your grandparents. And I was very lucky because, that I wouldn't have learned Norse mythology without my great-grandmother. But, I definitely see how hard it is now on what's expected of parents. And it's like you have to do all of this, and you have to do it on your own. And that just seems ridiculous.
Oh, it does. It does, and that's part of what we're doing in focusing on our real communities, the things that really make us heathen, and building that up into something that recreates those kinds of kinship structures where this kind of life is possible, which I think is a healthier kind of life.
Oh, absolutely. To a great degree, if you look across almost all cultures, the idea of having that multi-generational family and having that extended family present and active in your life, it's something that's not just looking back at, pre-Christian Germanic culture, but really it's still something that's very active. You see in India, or you see in the Middle East, or in China, or Japan.
You don't even have to look that far. If you look at the Amish community, or even hill folk back in the Ozarks, you see this entire network of extended family that lives and works in really close proximity to one another, and they have a strong bond.
You'll also see it in Alaska, in families that don't that live, more in the rural parts of Alaska.
Mm-hmm. So, getting back to the question of marriage and what it means, I think Josh, you hit a very good or a very important piece of that, which is what does it mean to have a family? And I have a lot of sympathy when it comes to what Christian, and especially fundamentalist Christians, are going through, because they're not wrong. I'm going to go ahead and say that they're right. Their way of life is crumbling. It's going away. It is dying. And they don't know how to deal with it. Because they have, for 1,000 years, 1,500 in some parts of the world, been the dominant ideology of the culture, of the cultural zeitgeist. They have marched for millennia forward in victory, and now they are suffering major cultural defeats. They are coming to grips with the fact that they no longer enjoy the privileged position that they once enjoyed, and that's a very difficult thing to come to grips with. So I have a lot of sympathy for them.
I can understand that empathy, and part of the, unlike many other cultures, there are many people within Christianity that don't want to, they're so black and white in what they believe that there's no room for changing with the times. Whereas a lot of other cultures kind of just said, "Oh, okay, well, we'll absorb your God too."
Well, yeah, because it's a different kind of, it's a completely different topic there. Yeah, they're gonna adapt. That's the thing is, I don't see Christianity as going away. I do see it becoming, as losing its place as the dominant religion in the West, and I don't see it or Islam or any of the monotheistic orthodoxic faiths as becoming the next step, unless you possibly lump, as I do in certain theological mind games, the current atheism movement as an outgrowth and reaction and evolution of Christianity.
I like to refer to them as evangelical atheists.
Yeah, but any atheism that contains a messianic component to it, and I'm not talking about the people that go, like the agnostics or the soft atheists, where I don't really buy it, and the soft materialist. I think that this world is this world, and that's about it. There's no supernatural. I'm talking about the evangelical, messianic atheist movement, which is basically Christianity 3.0.
The big
You
A
mean the
atheist.
atheism saved my life crowd?
Yeah.
I can see what you're saying, and I agree. I think that with Christianity slowly, well, not so slowly anymore, but beginning to lose its grip on the overculture, that it makes sense for them to feel a little put upon when it comes to things like challenging their definition of marriage openly and having it completely stripped away from them.
I will, though, say, in the defense of a lot of the atheism saved my life people, many of us I was raised evangelical Christian in the South, and many of us grew up in what now is being termed religiously abusive environments. And when I first got out of that, I was angry. I was mad. I was so mad for years. And so sometimes you have to kind of go there to process the absolute horrible things that were done to you in the name of religion.
My mom took my magic cards away.
Man, you had it hard.
Oh man. I won't go into the horror show that is Growing Up Southern Baptist, but it's I used to joke that my family's like the Duggars, only we wear pants. But no, my mom wouldn't let us watch The Simpsons because and she thought that it was, and wrestling was satanic. That was her other big thing. Like the WWE was satanic. I don't know.
I don't get it. I didn't grow up like that. I grew up in a very permissive household. My parents taught me to think for myself. My parents are very devout Catholics, very, very devout, but they're I would say post-Vatican II, pre-charismatic liberation theology Catholics.
I'm going to go ahead and pretend I know what that means.
My parents didn't think Catholics were Christians. There you go.
I've been there. I wasn't born in the South, but I grew up in the South, and I had that happen. But I understand the impulse intellectually, even though I never really really suffered through it. I mean, I don't claim that I particularly had a bad time growing up. I think I had a great time growing up. But at the same time, it is what it is, and you have to understand taking, replacing atheism for Christianity and not active or even heathenry, like slapping a hammer over your cross tattoo is all you're doing there is changing the skin level. You're not actually grappling with the cultural impulses that led you to the place where you found yourself.
Or the people who substitute Thor for Jesus.
Yep.
And you know what? If people are really seriously and they really get into heathenry, and we, to kind of touch back where we were, develop these really supportive communities that fulfill what people need from heathenry, then they grow out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I grew out of it. I went through an angry heathen phase where I blamed every single thing that was wrong with the world on Christianity. And I was very good at convincing myself that I was very good at justifying that. But ultimately what brought me out of it was actually, like Toby was saying, really getting into and trying to develop a heathen mindset and beginning to think like a heathen. And as you develop that, it becomes harder to maintain the level of attention it requires to be constantly angry.
Somebody posted on Facebook the other day about how I feel when people call the Norse mythology myths. Do I get offended? I'm like, I don't get offended by much these days because of that heathen worldview. Because I kind of look at it like, people are going to be offensive. And in the long run, what does it affect me, really? What is my deed? What is my response? Because getting all hot and bothered and offended at every little thing is not productive to anyone.
Oh, I get angry all the time. It's just who I am. But to be fair, I only really get angry with people that come into my personal space and then proceed to defile what I consider sacred. And I've come to grips with a lot of that anger is inward as much as it is outward. I want to define who I am, and at some point, you have to define who you are by clearly stating who you are not. And so I find a cleanness to that kind of anger. I don't make it nasty or dirty or whatnot. Although it often ends up getting worse because anger is met with anger, and then you have a fight on your hands. But I still feel the point of that behavior is making it very clear to myself as much as to the person that I am angry with, and to the people that are looking on, both that are in my group and out of my group, on what I consider to be acceptable and not. Do I always do it well? No. No, I do not. But I think it's a necessary act. And something that will become less necessary over time. I'll mellow out.
And I think that's actually a good point about the communities, because you have people that you can say, hey, can check your behavior, can say, hey, I'm really mad about this, and actually have, elders within your community, people you respect, to go to.
And I think, within that community, I think we're actually touching back on this idea of family being more than just mom, dad, and kids, but a group of people that hold, it's a term we should all be familiar with, hold a common thu together.
Yes. Now, because we have heathens of all skill levels, would you define that for the kiddos?
Well, and Toby, you can correct me if I just completely get this wrong, but thu is the common, it's common norms, common and accepted behavioral expectations.
It's mores. It's the mores of your community. It is the custom. That is the simple definition. The frith means peace definition. The thing that it's hard for certain non-traditional people who don't come from a ritualized society, to understand is that those norms, those mores, are not just unspoken, but they are elevated to the level of a sacred thing that is kept sacred. That thus are holy, that they're ritualized, that they are not to be broken, because breaking them harms the community. So there's a certain level of dedication and willfulness to thu that isn't quite captured by the term mores or mores, however you pronounce it. But the definition of thu definitely incorporates that concept of mores, of social mores.
So I did go ahead and invite Thorn. He said he had some stuff that he could contribute for and with and things. I don't know how caught up he is on what we're talking about, though.
Well, I've been listening to as much of it as I could get over the noise in my car as I drove home. And because I'm me, I'm pretty sure I can contribute to just about anything anybody ever has to talk about. But what really got me on it was listening to the three of you discuss the concept earlier of the recognition of heathenry by the U.S. government in various spaces. Because that's something that I have really personal experience with over the last decade or so. However, I don't want to derail the current conversation. I'm more than willing to catch up a little bit and join in wherever.
So,
well,
yeah,
go ahead, Toby.
So we're on another major digression from gay marriage, and we're talking about communal thus and signaling behavior and all the things that I've beaten the dead horse with you over the past couple of months. But I think if we can bring it back to the question of marriage, because this is something that I want to put to everybody on the in the conversation. What do you think a marriage is? Josh?
For me, a marriage seems to be, at minimum, two people coming together to grow and further their family and their own personal lives and goals. It seems to be something that you do to combine and strengthen your community, and modernly we add in quite a bit of love and affection to that.
Lauren, what do you think it is?
I would have to agree in the sense that it is basically the bringing together of two people, and really, depending on how involved you are in your two families for the reason of furthering the families, whether that is, usually the way we do it now is by having children, but there's also the sense of having that stability and structure, and quite frankly, we do put a lot of romantic stuff on it, and I think very heavily influenced with in the Victorian era with that kind of stuff, and sometimes I think to our detriment when we have marriage. But marriage should be but it's more than it's an economic commitment. It is a commitment to take care of one another. It's a commitment to work for each other's best interest and not just your own.
Cool. Hey, Torin, what do you think of marriages?
Well, actually, I can expand a little bit from where Lauren was going with it to get my personal feelings in the matter. Is I think these days we start with what she was talking about with the idea of romance that kind of built up out of the Victorian era, and I'm sure that in various forms existed well before that. Just weren't necessarily quite as important to the ultimate goal of becoming a married couple. But I think that's more than anything these days how we find our marriage partner, but not what defines what a marriage is. I think a marriage is the point when two people who have been in that sort of arrangement decide that their two families or their two clans, whatever you want to word it, are no longer best suited by being two. It's the way that the two come together and become one for the betterment of both, to strengthen both, which is honestly something that I have issues with in my own marriage, just because of my wife's fractious relationship with her own family. But yeah, when it comes down to it, that's what it is to me. As a marriage is just an extension of an existing relationship to encompass the family.
Cool. I'm gonna go out and say that marriage is an institution, or marriage isn't even an institution. That to think of it as an institution is to believe in a very Christian concept of marriage. Marriage is about property and weird. And really, when we get down to it, property is just a physical manifestation of weird, so that marriage is about weird. Marriage is about oaths. And marriage is about the bonds of oathing that create kinship where there was none before. And an oath is a very specific thing in heathen context. An oath is it has very specific requirements. At no point does an oath require a person to be of a particular sex or to be giving it to a person of another sex. Biology has nothing to do with oath taking and oath giving. When we bind ourselves in oaths, whether it's particularly oaths between two people, you see that expression in hold oaths and marriage oaths. These are oaths that create kinship, and as long as that kinship is strengthened, the oath is strengthened. When the oath is broken, when the kinship is broken, both people are made lesser for it, because the bonds of weird will punish them, and it's no different than cutting a high tension steel cable while under tension. It's not a punishment in the sense, and I used that term earlier and I shouldn't have. It's not a punishment, it's a consequence. So from that definition of marriage, that it is a oath-generated kinship, I don't see anything in heathenry that prevents two men from getting married, or two women. But I don't want to get on a rant, so I'd like to get your reactions to my statement there.
I think that there's a little more to it if we're trying to look culturally through that kind of heathen lens, in the fact that there were needs that needed to be taken care of in marriage that aren't necessarily the same things we need now because we don't own farms and our infant mortality rate is low, and versus, and I think that also plays an impact into it. Now, I agree completely. There's no diction about who can make an oath to who. But at the same time, I think that we also have to look at the fact that it can be a little more complicated than that. But to me, as a heathen, I feel like, and I know heathen gay and lesbian couples who, they're a family, no different than me, my husband, and I.
Torrin, Josh?
Oh, well, I can thank you, Toby, when you were talking, pretty much more eloquently saying most of what I was trying to get across than I did. That happens all too frequently. And getting towards that point that, and starting to touch on, I guess, the idea that gender and sexuality might have mattered once upon a time, but as Lauren was touching on some of her points, it no longer really does. Infant mortality rates are down. We don't really have a problem with population about keeping the clan strong through reproduction. That's still something that we obviously need to think about, but not something that's necessarily important. Excuse me for being scatterbrained. I was in the middle of doing something, and not giving you guys my full attention. Because strange enough, talking to other heathens made me need to go get a beer.
I still need to get my first.
It's like a compulsion.
It really is. It just kind of grabs a hold of the brain, and before you know it, you're grabbing something out of the fridge. It just happens. But I have to really agree with Toby on the concept of it being about a contract between two people, and that is, well, between two families, really, when it comes down to it, because that is the core of what marriage is, and I would say even more today than it ever was before, simply because we do get all the other love and romantic crap out of the way far before marriage. I was, myself and my wife, for example, we were married in everything but legal definitions well before we ever got married. We were sharing our finances, we were cohabitating, and we had been together for years, and then we decided to actually make it legal and official and, join our luck together and join our families together. So when it comes down to it, it's the oaths, it's the joining of luck that really defines marriage.
And I think that for me is where it comes down to, is could just be the Anglo-Saxon in me and the joining of luck via oath, but a marriage, regardless of who's involved, whether it's two men, two women, a man and a goat, I don't care.
Well, I think you should care about that part.
Yeah.
Well,
hyperbole is all well and good, but let's...
I know you Englishmen and your goats, but...
better than a pig. So, but what I was getting at is a marriage ultimately is an oath taken in front of your family and your community. And so you have bound yourself to all of these groups via this oath you've taken to one another. And for me, I think that's the most important bit.
Yeah, because, and I will say this, I think that part of marriage within modern heathen culture and construct is we should be issuing that oath in front of them, because that oath, to a degree, when you witness an oath placed, you are also in many ways bound to help make sure that oath comes to fruition. So you have more community support than, what would be expected from somebody who shows up at a Christian marriage, which also is a great excuse, just to put this out there, anybody who's going to have a heathen wedding, for culling down your guest list.
I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, I could see it.
34 people. It was great.
Hey, you had more than I did.
Oh, so I think that kind of you want to get into this conversation, you get into this moment, and you're like, nope, that about sums it up.
Yeah, I totally
There
agree.
seems to be right. There seems to be a synthesis when you go to break down these big issues, and then you realize they're not as complicated as the world seems to think it is.
And we do try to overcomplicate things because that's our nature.
Well,
Well, let's just consider ourselves fortunate we're not talking about the complicated things right now.
We're going to save those for when we've not been recording for however long we've been recording.
It's been over an hour.
I don't know
Yay.
about you guys. I'm fresh.
Well, some of us are not on the West Coast. Some of us are in Arkansas and getting close.
And by some of us, she means one of us.
Yeah, one of us is actually not on the West Coast. So
I'm
Right. Even Toby's close.
shut up. Shut up.
Well, you know, the West Coast is where all the real heathening is going on, so...
Right.
hey, I live in the same town with one other person on the sub. He's just
That's
never around anymore.
Wait, there's two of you in Arkansas?
Yeah, me and I don't want to use his real name because I don't have permission for that. But he's one of your mods. Yeah. But anyway, yeah. We went to the same college. Actually, he's
So-
no longer a mod, so never mind.
Okay, so
Well,
that's
Then, so yeah, you probably know what I'm talking about.
Oh, well, we've only lost one mod since I've been here, and
So yeah.
okay.
But yeah, totally. I'll shout out to he and I live in the same. There are actually, and then we have one of my friends, James, that lives north of us, not too far. But yeah, there's a few of us on the sub.
I know we've been going for over an hour, so we should probably get close to wrapping things up, but there are a couple of things I wanted to touch on real quick. Lauren, you mentioned something kind of cool going on in the Midwest with heathenry, and that was fostering.
Yes, I don't have personal experience with it, but I know that and I'm not really, Arkansas, we don't really consider ourselves as much part of the Midwestern heathenry, which is more Oklahoma, Kansas, some Missouri, and on up. But yeah, they are doing fostering where they are sending their teenagers to go live with another heathen in another family in another kindred for a part of the summer. And I think that's great. I think that's how we're going to build these really strong networks, is giving that kind of face time.
That's actually really fantastic. Some of the local heathens in this area, we arrange that along kinship lines. And well, with those of us that don't have necessarily any brothers or sisters to send our children to, we've arranged that with people who are as strong as family.
Yeah.
So it's great to hear that that's actually going on in some sort of formal way out there, and that it's specifically going on within a heathen context.
I think it's absolutely great, and it also just gives these teenagers a really good way to see, okay, this is how my parents' group does it, this is how this group does it, and then they're both right in their own way.
I think what you mean to say is they're both wrong in their own ways.
You're not the boss of me.
just remember, everybody, you're doing it wrong. Fostering is an interesting institution, and it's one that my folk back east are looking into. Not comfortable sharing the plans exactly because it's an in and yard kind of deal, but it's definitely institution. It's definitely English is hard. It's definitely an institution that has benefits, especially for geographically diverse intra-community relationships.
And let's face it, what parent doesn't want to get rid of a teenager for a few weeks?
Mm-hmm.
You're lowering I'm completely lost my train of thought there. Sorry, guys. You're lowering the teenage parent angst level.
Mm-hmm. It's a venerable institution that lasted well past Christianization. I don't know if weeks is something that I would I don't. I think it has to be a longer term thing. I think it has to be looked at like a summer abroad or a year abroad kind of deal. But that's a conversation for a different show.
Well, and that's definitely something we can get to eventually. Is what could be a valid and valuable way to do longer term fostering versus just spending a couple of weeks in the summer at someone else's house.
Mm-hmm.
And that would definitely be something we'll need to hunt down some of the groups that are doing this successfully and ask them how they started and what their process was.
Well, I know
I
know the current agreement with myself and my brother John with my theoretical spawn is for an entirety of a summer from the letting out of school until the starting again of it. But I could definitely see a situation in which it actually becomes an idea of transferring school districts, if that's what needs to be done, if it seems like it would bear more fruit that way.
And these things will naturally change and evolve as we do as communities.
Exactly. And a lot of times I know a lot of these things come about specifically from people who meet at these regional get-togethers. So one more time, I just want to plug the Our Asatru Cascadia event next year.
Well, Cascadia is where heathenry is being done correctly, so it will be good for as many people as possible to show up.
And again, we're talking about doing this late spring, early summer, and there's going to be more details coming to the subreddit, which again is r/asatru. We're planning on having a feast and a brewing contest and just a all-around good time, just not being at work.
And isn't that something to celebrate?
Hey, let's just make sure that whatever time it does eventually boil down to, that it's not one of those times a year that it's going to be 110 degrees in the shade where we do it at, because this Swede, for one, starts melting at about 85.
That's what you get for living where you live.
This is normal weather for me. I don't melt. I lived in Louisiana for a while, so.
Hey, you know what, Lauren? I lived in West by God, Virginia, for about 4 or 5 years, and I know what that kind of summer is like. So,
as my husband is from West by God, Virginia, I completely understand what you're saying.
Oh yeah, it's a terrible place. I never want to go back.
That state. I love that state so much.
That state is terrible. I just love a few of the people that are in it.
Yeah, I can't even say that.
So now, if I could real quick, because I know we're getting close to wrapping up here, I wanted to revisit the main topic that made me originally shoot a message to Josh and say, holy crap, I really need to join in, is the concept of the religious acceptance in the military, if it's not a problem to revisit that.
Actually, what I'd like to do is hold off on that.
That's fine.
And get you in along with a couple of other people who actually either retired military folk or military folk who are currently active, and let you guys just all talk at it.
That would be great. I know there's a few others, and I'm sure that there are opinions that are different than mine. I just think it would be a conversation well served by having actual military veterans involved.
Exactly, because I think our main point became, well, none of us are in the military veterans, so we really probably shouldn't do this. We should wait on other people to tell us what to do, or what they would like for us to do. So, and if you are interested in being part of that conversation, you can get a hold of either Josh or I on Reddit. You can go to heathen_talk on Twitter, or facebook.com/HeathenTalk. All of those are great ways to get a hold of one of us, and we will happily, if you're not completely annoying, probably let you on the show.
Absolutely. I'm in fairly regular communication with Josh, and I'm Sure, he'll tell me when to be at my computer, and if you guys don't really want me there, he'll just give me a bad time.
I'm going to give you a bad time either way.
That's what he does.
Well, I get the idea this is being kept family friendly, so I'll just hold that conversation to myself.
Yeah, that's one for, I guess, the moderator discussion, the mod mail.
The super secret moderator conversations that nobody ever gets to hear about.
Yeah, those ones.
I'm the only non-moderator in the group here on the show right now, so awkward.
You feel intimidated? You shouldn't.
No, not really. I wrangle a group of rowdy people on Facebook, so yeah.
See, so you've got it harder than we do.
Oh man, I just want to, I'll plug it for a minute. I run Heathen Debate on Facebook. It's oddly enough not that bad. It's not as bad as you would think it would be.
Well, don't worry. Now that I know about it, I'll join it and make it bad.
I will approve you as soon as you join.
That's dangerous.
Because the topics are really kind of slowing down, so I need some rabble-rousers. We ran out all our white supremacists, so...
Oh, well, that's a shame. Don't worry. Our super secret mod conversation has a topic that came up today that ought to be really fun to introduce there.
Oh, yes. Now, we have talked Confederate flags in gay marriage, so that's already been brought up.
This is a lot more fun than that. And in fact, I think it'll be a great conversation for a future episode of this podcast.
Excellent.
I agree with that, but if we're going to do that, it's going to take some more hashing out between at least the four of us here and maybe some people who have some insight from a more direct experience level.
Absolutely.
So let's tease them some more. Come listen in.
Well, we definitely don't want to tell them what the topic is because, then they might actually want to listen to it.
You have to, see, there you go. You have to come join Heathen Debate, the Facebook group Heathen Debate, so you can find out what the topic is because it's going to get put on there at some point. And then you'll have to listen to hear the really juicy details. Don't worry, I have no idea what it is either.
We have two people listening right now who are just ready to hear about what we're going to talk about when they get to it.
To be fair, more people will listen once we put it up on iTunes, which I haven't figured out yet, but that's okay.
So I think with that, just to wrap it up, do a couple of quick plugs. We've plugged the Heathen Debates Facebook group. I think we've talked about the sub more than enough for one night. They don't need the ego boost. And again, if you're in the area, going to be in the area, want to be in the area, keep tabs on the sub, and we will make sure that you know what's going on with our Cascadia get-together.
Did you just say you're not going to plug the sub and then plug the sub?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I just want to say for the record that we start this with the podcast created by Reddit Asatru for the Heathen community.
It's true. Pretty much, that's been the way it's gone.
All right.
Does anyone else have anything they want to plug or talk about here as we wrap it up?
I mean, honestly, anything I'd have to plug at this point would be more ego stroking than anything, so I think we can probably move along.
All right. So future episodes, we're planning on doing these as often as we can. I think we agreed maybe between Lauren and myself, a weekly thing. Obviously, bigger subjects will take longer to research, but
if you guys have ideas for stuff you'd like us to talk about, by all means, catch us on Reddit or Facebook or Twitter and let us know. We like other people's ideas.
And tell us how we did it wrong.
Hey, absolutely. But keep in mind, you aren't the boss of me.
Honestly, that sounds like a really good sign-off. So unless Josh,
I think that's great.
Unless Josh has some really terrible, slightly heathen-related music to put on at the end, like I've heard from some other heathen podcasts, it sounds like a rap.
Do not make me bust out the 13th Warrior.
All right. Good night, everybody. I'm out.
Night.
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 Once we get our feed stuff up, I'll see if I can't find us some some horrible intro music from one of the podcast music services that my husband can then do the voiceover. My husband does voiceover, and he has that movie In a World where whatever. So he has agreed to do voiceover for the podcast.
Okay, please tell me he's going to start it with "In a World."
Yes.
Well, I don't care what it says after that, as long as that's how it starts.
I will get something written up and have him record it. Probably it won't be till Friday, but yeah, it'll be awesome.
Fantastic.
All right. So,
All right. And if you need help,
signing off.
yeah, if you need help with editing stuff, you know how to get a hold of me, Josh. So,
Will do.
all right, I will talk to y'all later.
And that's all she wrote. Good night.
And good luck.